Hi, I'm Chris from airwindows, and hey, it's forbidden music again. But I'm going back to the well here because today's forbidden music is literally the song Hotel California off of the album Hotel California, and I'm going to tell you why I chose this, given that there's all this other kind of stuff that I could be using. Here's the album. There's the band and the weird stuff in the background. This is a very spooky album. It is about a voyage, as Don Henley liked to say, from, oh God, I don't even remember, Innocence to something else. It's on their video of either that on the video or on the DVD special features for History of the Eagles Part 1. That at least I know. So what's the deal with Hotel California? The reason I'm choosing it is because I am frantically working on airwindows meter. By the time you see this, I might actually have a version like what I'm demonstrating out. I don't know. It depends upon whether a week is going to be enough for getting it ready. My heart is set on being able to do a proper tutorial video next weekend, but I'm still debugging it and figuring out how to get it to do new things. And so what I'm going to tell you today is what you're seeing in it and what it means. And you're actually going to be looking at two instances of meter on this forbidden music and hearing everything through ContentID, as I always do. So we don't get to listen to the Eagles on YouTube. I'm sorry, that's just not a thing. You'll hear little blips of it, and that'll show you where you're at in the song. But the point is being able to show what this kind of stuff does. So the difference, differences in meter between last week and now. I have dialed all of the slew energy back very slightly, which is the first substantial change I've made in the underlying where the dots go on the screen in probably years. And I'll tell you why. I started to dial in the behavior of like the point clouds that I'm measuring with all of this for the purpose of being able to do a proper cloud density measurement and assigning a letter grade based on that. And I started actually getting it to work where rather than just loudness of the dot, and you're measuring how high it goes on the screen, it's trying to measure how many dots in a little cloud can there be at once. How spread out can they be? If they are overlapping, that's bad. If they're evenly distributed, that's ideal. And the whole idea was, how can I accentuate that so that the letter scores that I'm generating and so on refer to that and not simply more is better. More is kind of more. You do get some action out of this, but the idea is much more about the distribution, and that has ended up with me changing the names of these categories, and I'm going to have to be remembering them going forward in order to be able to explain this stuff. Like what was peaks and still does measure peaks is now being called space, because as that letter score goes up, it correlates to, is there more space in the mix? Does the mix have like this sort of intangible quality to it where it feels open and big and not like congested or unpleasant or whatever? Turns out you can measure that, and I am. And it's correlated with that sort of cloudiness rather than everything being a flat line of maximally loud. And that means that as you push harder and go louder, in some cases that letter grade will go lower because you're not making as good of a cloud anymore. Same deal with slew, which I'm calling air because the more diffuse that reading is, sort of the airier stuff is. And then the bottom one, the zero cross meter, which required special handling because it's a different kind of measurement, I'm calling that foundation. And I put a lot of effort into trying to make it so that you can throw stuff like, I don't know, Pink Floyd The Wall, or here's another example, Burial, at it. And just because the amount of bass is overwhelming doesn't automatically mean that foundation is going to be a really high value. What it's looking for is a lot of stuff happening, an even distribution, again, rather than just maximally loud, flat sine hitting. It wants to churn stuff up a little bit more in order to get a high grade. And if all of these three measurements, the space, the air, the foundation, they can be all different amplitude levels. Like modern loudinated stuff will be pushing those things all up to higher volumes. They'll go to letters. They'll go up to lowercase a and then uppercase A and then all the way to F if they can go that far. If all of that balances, you end up with a high total letter grade score, rating things from A to, I think it's T is the lowest that I have. It seems to be working. It's just important to understand that it's assigning your score based on how well each of those categories balances with the other categories, rather than if you make the letters go higher, then the end result is higher. No, not necessarily. Instead, if you make the letters all match, then the end result is higher. And what we're seeing here in Hotel California is an example of an incredibly good mix, which I've been putting so much effort into trying to get things like the quiet section or whatever to be accurately represented in tone color, because the tone color is generated by these letter grades and the raw information going into the letter grades. And it's doing a fairly good job of tracking that tone color across the entire song with all these different changes. The points to watch are the points where the tone color sweeps through white, sweeps through perfectly balanced, because I have a hunch that that kind of thing is associated with memorable moments in music, and the bits where you're like, oh, that was a great part of the song, will typically correlate to that. There's a lot. I'm working on this really hard because I've always wanted to develop this kind of technology and be able to measure these things. Turns out it's not exclusively the venue of old vinyl records, but it shows up on them pretty well, which is what drew me into trying to develop this. It's going to be really interesting to see which loudinated modern CDs like my King Gizzard collection or my Dead Mouse collection also register in this way. And previous versions of this did extremely impressively with stuff like Strobe by Dead Mouse and so on. And every time I keep revising it, I keep going up a level in terms of what I'm able to drag out of the data being the audio of the song being played through it. The end goal is hopefully being able to make it so that this can sit on console X3 bus, or technically it's console X3 and you just set it to be the bus, or indeed set it to be the center and then just run it as a processor. But the idea is being able to have that sit on your bus as the final output meter, and then it tells you what to do. It tells you, did you turn up that hi-hat too loud or not, or how is the lows coming across properly? What's this balance like? What happens when we introduce this instrument? It should be able to tell you those things simply by giving a reading of what's going on in the tone color. And you get to control the tone color through arrangement and mixing. On that note, I need to get back to measuring all these things and making these videos. And I'm going to play you, and again, I will be showing you two instances of airwindows meter. One of them is the full size, so you can see where all the dots sit. Only thing that's really changed there is the slew dots are going to sit slightly lower on the screen. That's partly because all of my biggest top 10 hits that I started running through, things tended to lean in a direction of the slew was a little too high, it was reading the slew as too high, and then all the slews were doing tiny little overslews all the time. And I managed to come up with a setting where it matched with peak much better. That being a sort of final adjustment for everything kind of coming into focus and doing what I wanted. And with a bit of luck, you'll see that in the big meter, which shows where all the dots are, and it has those tone color stripes. But then there's a little instance of meter up in the corner right where the end score shows for the tone color stripes. And that's what you get when you take meter and shrink it down into postage stamp size, is it starts showing just the output score in much bigger letters. And then the background of the meter becomes entirely the tone color so that you can see what it's doing on a sort of ongoing basis. Because if it's just on the stripes, it's hard to pick out exactly what's happening at any given moment. Shrink it down until it's just showing only the tone color, and you totally can. Also, I did take the output, the airwindows globals. I have told it to use tone color for the color of all windows that don't have a texture. And then I told airwindows meter not to have a texture, so it's being drawn in the same tone color, which animates as you go. So the border of the screen will also be lighting up with the same color that's being shown on the shrunk down tiny window. That's all on the existing version of airwindows meter. It's dialing it in and getting the readings and scores to actually tell you something useful that I'm working on at the moment. Without any further ado, here is Hotel California again, because the last time I showed it was on a much older version of meter. And on the current version of meter, which may or may not be quite finished, but I'm working as hard as I can. And I will let people have this as soon as I possibly can. Here you go.
Desert highway, my hair rising up ahead in the distance, shimmering light too dim. There she stood in mission bell. Myself, this could be hell. Then she showed me the way. Corridor. Welcome, California. It's such a lovely place. prisoners here, and in them they gathered for habit with their stealing.